On today's Prophetic Rewind.
That's why I know God's hand is upon Israel. You know why I know? Because it's so unnatural for them to be attacked like they are. Father, I commit to you the praises, the incense, the lifting of hands, the brokenness of the heart, the purity of hands, the drawing near by the blood of Christ that speaks of better things than that of Abel, surrounded by a great cloud of witness. We with them, the eternal beings, the spirits of just men made perfect, innumerable company of angels, Jesus the mediator of the new covenant, the sprinkling of the blood that speaks of better things than that of Abel. We together raise our hands and our hearts before you, declaring your majesty, declaring your greatness, your magnificence, your omnipresence, your omnipotence, your omniscience, your infallibility, your immutability. All of this given to us. We give to you the light that you gave to us, and we give it back to you today. So many people are being touched right now all over the world. Doesn't matter what your language is, what your culture is. There is nothing. It's universal. It's global. It's kingdom. And as the kingdom is present now, let the impossible be nothing. Impossible is nothing in your presence. Touch them now, Lord, every person watching all over the world, knowing that you care for them. Let that one note strike at the very core of darkness. Strike the very forces of darkness that are coming closer, Lord, not to reach the hearts and the lives of your people, Israel, to remind you that there is an everlasting covenant with Israel. Israel is forever. Shout to the Lord. Now, if you can sense what I'm sensing, every one of you watching, you have to. Because it's not confined to this room. It's not confined to an ark. It is all over the earth right now. For you, for your benefit. Reach out your hands and your heart. lay aside that force of unbelief. Say, God, I'm giving it. I'm giving it to you. I'm giving it to you. I just heard you speak about an everlasting covenant. I embrace it. This covenant, this ancient covenant. The antiquity of this covenant, which was made before the earth was formed. We embrace it as a people, for our nation, for our families, for our homes, for our ministry. Thank you, Lord, for touching and ministering to each person now. In your presence, we love to give. Give praise, give joy, give light, give love. And we love you and bless you. Amen. Yes. Welcome to the den, the place where you experience the future. You experience hope. Today, we have very special guests that you're going to enjoy. We have a panel. My team are back from Poland and Germany. And my beautiful daughter, Donné, is standing next to me. And she's going to share a few things with me about this terrible thing, hatred. And we're going to find out today that the enemy is endeavoring to do the same thing that he did 1939, 1940, 41, 42, 40, how he tried to destroy the Jewish people, God's people, how he tried to do it. And so you're going to be enlightened today, and we're going to receive, many of you are going to receive forgiveness, are going to forgive and receive forgiveness. Because some of you were in the position I was 20 years ago. It's called replacement theology. Where it was taught us that we replace the Jews and God no longer cares for them. And what started creeping in was that same disgusting spirit. How that enemy, that's why I know God's hand is upon Israel. You know why I know? Because it's so unnatural for them to be attacked like they are. Now, early Christian thinking held Jews collectively responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus. This religious teaching became embedded in both Catholic and Protestant theology during the first millennium, with terrible consequences for Jews. Following many centuries of persecution and exclusion, the Jewish minority in Europe achieved some rights after the Enlightenment. Some rights. As Europe became more secular and Jews integrated into the mainstream society, political forms of antisemitism emerged. Jews were targeted for their ideas and their role in society. In the late 19th century, pseudo-scientific theories that legitimized a racial form of anti-Semitism became popular with some intellectual and political leaders. Popular. Now, all of these centuries of hatred were exploited by the Nazis and their allies during the World War II, culminating in the Holocaust, the systematic murder of Europe's Jews. History has shown that whatever anti-Semitism has gone, whenever it's gone unchecked, the persecution of others has been present and not far behind. I'm talking about Christians as well. Defeating anti-Semitism must be a cause of great importance, not only for Jews, but for all people who value humanity and justice.
Prejudice against or hatred of Jews, known as anti-Semitism, has plagued the world for more than 2,000 years.
That's right.
In February 2007, a Jewish memorial to the Holocaust was defaced and nearly 300 Jewish graves desecrated in Odessa in southern Ukraine. In recent years, there has been an increase in anti-Semitism in the form of hate speech, violence, and denial of the Holocaust. These incidents are occurring everywhere, but especially in the Islamic world and in lands where the Holocaust occurred. In many Middle Eastern countries, anti-Semitism is promoted in state-controlled media and education system. Militant groups with political power, such as Hamas, use genocidal language regarding Jews and the State of Israel. The president of Iran repeatedly has declared the Holocaust a myth and that Israel should be wiped off the map. In Europe, anti-Semitism is increasingly evident among both far-right and far-left political parties. And in the United States, some Jewish students on some college campuses are confronted by anti-Semitic hostility. Violence targeting Jews and Jewish institutions continues around the world. Denial and minimization of the Holocaust, along with other forms of hatred against Jews, is now widespread on the internet in multiple languages.
And from the days of the Bible until the Roman Empire, Jews were criticized and sometimes punished for their efforts to remain a separate social and religious group, one that refused to adopt the values and the way of life of the non-Jewish societies in which it lived. The rise of Christianity greatly increased hatred of Jews. They became seen not merely as outsiders, but as a people who rejected Jesus and crucified him. Now listen to this, because they refused to accept the fact that the Roman authorities ordered and carried out the crucifixion. So by the High Middle Ages, which is the 11th to the 14th centuries, Jews were widely persecuted as barely human. Now listen, Christ killers and devils. Today what we're going to discuss is one of the root problems in the fact that they believe that when Jesus said that they were of their father the devil, that he was speaking about the Jews. We're going to speak about that in a while, where that little things like that cause this problem. Forced to live in all Jewish ghettos, they were accused of poisoning rivers and wells during times of disease. Some were tortured and executed for supposedly abducting and killing Christian children to drink their blood or to use it in baking matzah, a charge known as the blood libel. A large number were forced to convert to Christianity to avoid death, torture, or expulsion, though many of them secretly practiced Judaism after their conversions. In recent times, the Catholic Church and other Christian churches have rejected these anti-Semitic falsehoods.
In the 18th century, as the influence of Christianity began to lessen during the Enlightenment, which celebrated the rights and possibilities of men and women to a far greater extent than ever before, religiously based hatred of Jewishness gave way to non-religious criticism. Judaism was attacked as an outdated belief that blocked human progress. Jewish separatism was again targeted. As European countries began to take modern shape in the 19th century and national pride grew, Jews who were still usually deprived of civil rights and lived throughout Europe as outsiders were subjected to further hostility. This hostility resulted at times in deadly persecution, as in the late 19th century Russian pogroms, which were violent attacks on Jewish communities with the aid or indifference of the government. At the same time, in response to the decline of Christian belief and the growing number of Jews beginning to join the mainstream of European society, a trend known as assimilation, the anti-Semites turned to the new racial science, an attempt since discredited by various scientists and writers to prove the supremacy of non-Jewish whites. The opponents of Jews argued that Jewishness was not a religion but a racial category, and that the Jewish race was biologically inferior.
So the belief in a Jewish race would later become Germany's justification for seeking to kill every Jewish person in lands Germany occupied during World War II, whether the person practiced Judaism or not. In fact, even the children or grandchildren of those who had converted to Christianity were murdered as members of the Jewish race. Now, the Holocaust, as the systematic mass extermination between 1939 to 1945 is known, resulted in the death of 6 million Jews. I don't care what the idiot says from Iran. More than a third of the world's Jewish population. While the rise to power of the Nazis in the 1920s and 1930s involved numerous social and political factors, the views that helped turn anti-Semitism into official government policy included belief in the inborn superiority of Aryans or whites, belief that Jews destroyed societies, that Jews secretly worked together to gain control of the world, and that Jews already controlled world finance, business, media, entertainment, and communism.
In the half-century since World War II, public anti-Semitism has become much less frequent in the Western world. While stereotypes about Jews remain common, Jews face little physical danger. The hatred of Jewishness and the conspiracy beliefs of past eras are for the most part shared only by tiny numbers of those on the fringes of society. Although, as the World Trade Center and Oklahoma bombings showed, even a handful of extremists can carry out acts of great violence.
That's right.
There are exceptions, of course. Disagreement over policy toward the State of Israel has created opportunities in which the expression Zionist, support for Israel as the Jewish homeland, is often used as an anti-Semitic code word for Jew in mainstream debate. Holocaust denial and other recent rewritings of history, such as the false claim that Jews controlled the Atlantic slave trade, lie about the events of the past in order to make Jews seem underhanded and evil. More seriously, many nations in Europe and in the former Soviet Empire are struggling, mostly due to unsettled or chaotic economic and social conditions, with movements opposing foreigners, including recent immigrants and traditional enemies. These movements champion racial or national supremacy and call for the type of charismatic authoritarian leader that historically persecuted Jews and other minorities. But while parts of Europe remain caught up in racial unrest, the Middle East is home to the harshest anti-Semitism in the world today. Nazi-like language is regularly expressed by the media and governments in the countries that oppose Israel in the West. And as dozens and dozens of terrorist incidents have demonstrated, there are many in the Middle Eastern countries willing to act on these beliefs. Tonight we will deal with these issues, and our guests from Germany and Codebreakers will discuss the rising hatred for the Jewish people and the subtle advance of the Fourth Reich, and what God is planning against Israel's enemies.
Hitler stated his goals clearly. The aim is not the arrival at a certain line, but the annihilation of living forces. Kill Poles without mercy, all men, women, and children of Polish descent or language. Only in this way can we obtain the living space we need. All Poles will disappear from the world. It is essential that the great German people should consider it as its major task to destroy all Poles. Fighting alone against the greatest military power of the time, Poland was suddenly attacked by the Soviet Union on the east. Against these two mighty dictatorships, the Poles were forced to capitulate on October 5th, 1939. Hitler and Stalin divided the prostrate country between them, and everything we know as human rights was suspended for the people of Poland. In the German-occupied zone, this meant mass arrests, deportations to concentration camps, slavery, and mass executions. Notices listing names of the executed and threats of reprisal for resistance were widely posted. The German occupying forces began segregating the Jewish from the Christian population, ultimately setting up walled-in ghettos where Jews were forced to live in appalling misery. Proclamations of a death sentence for Jews found outside ghetto walls, and for Polish Christians offering any form of assistance, were posted throughout the so-called Aryan areas. Not only individuals, but entire Christian families and sometimes neighbors were summarily executed for helping Jews. Their names were publicized to deter others. In the ghettos, death through starvation, disease, and random murder became common. Then, in 1942, the Germans implemented a frightening new policy: the wholesale deportation of Jews and their extermination in gas chambers. These were the conditions under which Żegota was born.
So Donné, why don't you tell the people where we're at and also the significance of what we're seeing here with these chairs?
Okay. When we saw this, we found it to be quite strange, you know, that there was a square full of just chairs. Once we looked into it, it actually turned out to be quite disturbing, because when the Jews were sent to the ghettos, and this is including women and children, all of their furniture was thrown here into the square. And each of the chairs here represents 1,000 Jews who were killed, who died, and that there are at least 68 chairs. So that means at least 68,000 people who died are represented here in the square, which is, it's very disturbing.
What we read is that there was a Section A of the ghetto and a Section B. Section A was for those people that were actually working in the ghetto. They were employed. Section B was for people that were unemployed, so to speak. That's what they say. And when the ghetto was emptied, when it was time for the final solution, they took this Section A, the people that were working, and they sent them to labor camps, basically to be put to death, to be worked to death, or to be gassed in the gas chambers. Section B, which consisted mostly of women, children, the elderly, and the ill, were killed. They just slaughtered them in this place where we're standing right now. So much innocent blood was shed on this territory. And if you were to be here in those days, one of the outsiders, you know, walking, going to work, doing your normal everyday living, while so much hell was taking place in this square. And if you want to see here this train station, which is not in operation today, but they left it because it's the actual train station that took the remaining people to Auschwitz. And also you would see that all throughout this square, all these buildings around here were just covered in flags with the swastika. The Nazi flags were just pouring out of each window. So it was just like a statement, a horrific statement of all that was taking place.
I just want to take a quick moment, and I won't take too long, but I just wanted to interject here and thank all of you for supporting Prophetic Rewind. You have no idea how much it helps me with continuing the legacy of my father. Because, as many of you know, his prophecies are still coming to pass. And what God did in my father was not confined to one human life. It was what God was doing. And that's why Prophetic Rewind is so important, because there are vital and essential things for the body of Christ that could only come from a true prophet of God. And that's what Prophetic Rewind is all about. And so when you support Prophetic Rewind, you are supporting me continuing that legacy, not only of my father, but what God was doing through my father. And that's going to help me do so many things. There are albums, books of his prophecies, and so many other things that I'm working on. And when you support Prophetic Rewind, when you give an offering to that, you are still giving to the prophet and to what God was doing through him. So I won't take any more of your time, because we're going to go right back in there. But thank you again, and let's go.
And we want you to see parts of it today, the relevant parts that I want to share with you concerning America, concerning Russia and China, what's taking place right now, all enemies, and also about the Fourth Reich, which you heard a little about, Third Reich, but you're going to hear about the Fourth Reich, which is very important because once again, we're going to see the Germanic countries getting involved with a war against the Jews, and they're going to, it's very interesting what the Lord said. In fact, in Europe now, and the antisemitism is so bad. Actually, after the Second World War, it never left. It really didn't. It stayed there, it lingered, but now it's a little more aggressive. And I'm seeing that this is rising up again and will take place also in Germany. But of course, it'll be the infiltration of the Muslim countries trying to once again get a hold of Europe and infiltrate it to destroy the youth and to get rid of the Jews.
I want to bring Doobie here. He's, of course, from Israel. He's a Jew. And if anyone knows the story of the Jews in Poland and what specifically this square, what the stories that these walls, the story that these rocks have to say, it's you, Doobie. Go ahead and share with the people some of what you're feeling right now.
You know, dear warriors, I've been here several times, but this mission is so much different. These times that I've been here, I came on business, on private tours, but ever since I was hooked with this ministry, I felt that something is changing in my life. And when I came here to Poland, it's the first time that the ground, that the soil spoke to me, that I started to hear the sounds, the echoes of what really took place here to my people. I was born in a prevailing Israel, in a country that can defend itself, in a state that is one of the strongest in the world, the strongest Air Force, the ally of America. We are not going to bend over for anyone to beat us. But when I hear on the soil of Europe, I see the way that my own people, my ancestors were treated, it's killing me in a way. But now it's even worse, because when I hear the prophet talking about the Fourth Reich, I can feel it. I can sense something is changing in Europe, and I'm sure that we're going to deal with this later on as we're going to broadcast to you from the soil of Europe and Poland and even Germany later on. But here on this square that is called the heroes of the ghetto, and just all of a sudden the sun shines when you speak about these heroes for a moment, I can see not only the chairs that represent the people that died, but I can hear the screams of the people that have been tortured in this building over there, that you can go closer later on and you can see the years 1941, 1942. This was the Gestapo headquarters. This is where they tortured those righteous people among the nations, the Polish people that walked on the streets over there and tried to save Jewish lives. And they were trying to give them a shelter. Those people were taken here in front of the other people in the ghetto, and they were tortured and executed in this main square here. There's one example, just behind where you are standing, did everything he could do. The only Christian in the Jewish ghetto that was a righteous among the nation. This Tadeusz Pankin, the man that was a pharmacist and was offered by the Nazis, almost more than offered, he was almost commanded by the Nazis to get out of this area and go and get a new building as his pharmacy, because he would be the only non-Jewish person in the ghetto. And yet this man refused to evacuate. He says this was his grandpa's pharmacy and he can make a living anyways. This was only to disguise his real purpose, because you remember, I told you before, there were 25% of Jewish people living in this area here. And this 25% of these people, they were his customers. I mean, it wasn't just chosen like that to become the original pharmacy of the guy that actually saved so many lives. This place was already held by a family that had their relations with the Jewish people for a long time. And he knew everyone by his name. He knew everyone by his sickness. He knew everyone by what he needed. And this guy, Tadeusz Patenkin, the guy is actually made it possible and convinced the Nazis that he should stay here in this place and run his business. So this was a deal. First of all, he could sell to anyone he wanted. So people think that the ghetto is a place that it's sealed with walls and everything. Yeah, there were walls and everything, but there were gates. If you weren't a Jew, you could go into the ghetto, purchase your medications, and get out of the ghetto. This wasn't a problem for you. But during the same time, Tadeusz started to help the Jewish people slightly and little by little. The beginning, he brought them newspapers from the world, so they can see what's going on and what's happening under the noses of the Nazis. Because what the main idea that the Nazis was holding is the disguise, the secret. You know that people went all the way to the crematorium, to the gas chambers, without really knowing what's expecting them. They didn't even believe what is going to happen to them. So this guy brought them information and knowledge from the world. Later on, he was forbidden to sell them drugs, but he was selling medications to the people underground. Then he started to sign as a pharmacist like a death report for people that he was asked to go and see if they're still alive or not, because he was qualified for this. So he signed a report that this person was dead. They covered him, put him in a cart, and took him so he can be buried somewhere else. And the way that he used his knowledge, his relations, to save lives. So this is what is for me, you know, as a Jew, as an Israeli, as somebody that is coming from a very strong and determined society, to see what happened to my own people over here I'm hearing the ground whispering and crying to me. But on the other hand, I can see these righteous people that risks everything again to give life to others.
You know what I love about the prophetic is you get so close to the heart of God. You hear His mind, His thoughts, what He plans to do. You know, you need this on a regular basis. And there are millions of viewers all over the world that experience this twice a week, sometimes even more, at my den. And you can experience it as well. I would love to have you there. All you got to do is go to kim.tv. We have so much. We have worship, we have songs that come from the heart of God, prophetic words about things that have not happened yet. That's what we say to the people, welcome to the future. And I want you to experience that. I look forward to seeing you there.